Have you ever gone out of your way to help someone only to realize that your kindness is being taken for granted? Imagine this. You lend a friend your time, resources, and emotional support, hoping that it will be appreciated. Yet, instead of gratitude, you're met with indifference or worse, exploitation. You start to feel drained, as if your generosity has become a burden rather than a gift. It's a situation many of us have experienced, one that makes you wonder, where does kindness end and where does people pleasing begin? Kindness and people pleasing often get confused, but they are far from the same thing. Kindness is a genuine desire to help others, to make the world a better place, and to foster good relationships. It's a strength that, when practiced mindfully, can enrich lives, including your own. However, when kindness lacks boundaries, it can easily slip into people pleasing, a pattern where you prioritize others' needs at the expense of your own. People pleasing is often driven by a fear of rejection or the desire for approval, leading to actions that may feel good in the moment but leave you feeling undervalued or taken advantage of in the long run. In this conversation, we will explore why kindness, when practiced without boundaries, can lead to disrespect and even resentment. Drawing on Stoic principles, we'll look at how to reshape your kindness into an empowering and respected act, one that is rooted in self awareness and mutual respect. By shifting from being a people pleaser to someone whose kindness is balanced, you can transform how others perceive you and, more importantly, how you perceive yourself. Let's dive into how you can maintain your kindness without losing your sense of self. Kindness, at its core, is an act of goodwill and compassion, an inherent desire to help others without the expectation of anything in return. True kindness is not transactional. It is not motivated by the need for validation or approval. Instead, it comes from a place of genuine care, empathy, and a desire to contribute positively to others' lives. As Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, the best way to avenge yourself is to not be like that. This reflects the Stoic view that kindness, like all virtues, is an action grounded in self control, wisdom, and a commitment to the greater good, not to satisfy ego or seek external validation. When practiced authentically, kindness can foster deep, meaningful relationships built on trust and respect. People appreciate those who help and support them with sincerity. However, kindness must be done with intention and balance. For instance, consider a person who consistently volunteers in their community. They do so not because they are seeking recognition or validation, but because they care deeply about making a difference. As a result, their acts of kindness inspire those around them, creating a ripple effect of goodwill. This person is respected, appreciated, and valued because their kindness comes from a place of genuine concern, not a desire to please or manipulate others. The community benefits from the act, and the giver in turn feels fulfilled by contributing to a cause greater than themselves. The benefits of kindness, however, are often undermined when it is done without boundaries. Kindness without limits can easily transform from a selfless act to a subtle form of people pleasing. When kindness is offered indiscriminately with no consideration for one's own needs or the needs of others, it can quickly turn into an expectation, not an act of generosity. This happens when the giver starts to feel obligated to continue giving, and the receiver, instead of expressing gratitude, takes it for granted. For example, consider a colleague who is always asking for favors, yet never offers any help in return. Over time, the one who's constantly giving becomes resentful, as their kindness is no longer seen as a gift but as something expected. This creates an imbalance in the relationship where one party feels used and the other remains indifferent. The giver may feel trapped in the cycle of people pleasing, constantly meeting others' needs without having their own met. This is where the danger lies in unchecked kindness. Without boundaries, kindness loses its purity and becomes a tool for self interest, driven by the need for external validation. What begins as a genuine act of compassion turns into a way to avoid conflict, gain approval, or seek affirmation. The giver may start to feel unappreciated and drained, unable to fulfill their own needs because they're too busy trying to satisfy others. As a result, the kindness that was once meant to build trust and rapport now becomes a source of frustration and resentment, both for the giver and the recipient. The The Stoic approach to kindness is rooted in the understanding that kindness should be offered freely, but not at the cost of one's own integrity or well being. The Stoics valued virtue above all else, and this included acts of kindness. However, they believed that kindness should be exercised with wisdom, ensuring that one's own needs were not sacrificed for the sake of pleasing others. In their view, true virtue lies in acting for the right reasons, not because of external pressures or the need for validation. Therefore, the key to maintaining the purity of kindness lies in knowing when to say no, when to set limits, and when to prioritize one's own needs. It's about understanding that kindness, when given without the expectation of receiving anything in return, is its own reward. But when kindness becomes an obligation or a way to seek approval, it loses its value and can lead to burnout and resentment. In sum, kindness is a powerful force when practiced with intention and balance. It strengthens relationships, builds trust, and creates positive change. However, when practiced without boundaries, it can quickly become a source of frustration and exploitation. To cultivate genuine kindness, it is essential to recognize the importance of boundaries, prioritize self care, and ensure that kindness is offered freely without the desire for validation or approval. In doing so, we can ensure that our kindness remains a source of empowerment, both for ourselves and those around us. The dangers of unrestrained kindness are often not immediately visible, but over time they can have profound consequences on both the person giving and those receiving their generosity. While kindness is inherently positive, giving without limits can quickly turn into something that leads to burnout, resentment, and ultimately a loss of genuine connection. Understanding the psychological dynamics behind overgiving and its impact on relationships is key to maintaining healthy boundaries and ensuring that kindness remains a source of strength rather than weakness. When kindness is given without limits, it often results in burnout and resentment. This happens because the giver is continually putting the needs of others before their own, depleting their emotional, mental, and physical resources. Over time, this imbalance can cause the giver to feel unappreciated and taken for granted, even though their original intent was to help others. The initial sense of satisfaction that comes from helping or making a difference can quickly dissipate as the giver becomes increasingly overwhelmed, unable to maintain the same level of generosity without sacrificing their own well being. The psychology of overgiving plays a key role in this cycle. When we give too much without taking time to replenish ourselves, it can trigger feelings of exhaustion and frustration. We may feel that we are being taken advantage of, yet continue giving in an effort to fulfill our own need for approval or recognition. Over time, this turns kindness from an act of goodwill into an obligation, one that the giver feels bound to fulfill regardless of the cost to themselves. Additionally, when we give too much, we inadvertently change the perception others have of our kindness. What was once seen as a generous act can begin to be viewed as something that is expected. People may begin to take our generosity for granted, assuming that we will always be there to offer help or support, regardless of their own needs or circumstances. This is where the danger lies. When kindness becomes routine, it loses its value, and the recipient may begin to feel entitled to it. The more you give, the less people value your kindness. This is an unfortunate truth that many who are excessively generous encounter. When kindness is given without limits, it can shift from being a cherished gift to something that is simply expected. For example, consider a person who is constantly going out of their way to help others, offering support, advice, or material assistance at every turn. In the beginning, their acts of kindness are met with gratitude, but over time, as the recipient becomes accustomed to receiving, they begin to take this generosity for granted. At first, this might not seem problematic. After all, kindness is about giving without expecting anything in return. However, the issue arises when the giver finally needs help themselves. If they've been giving endlessly without asking for anything in return, there's a good chance that others will not reciprocate. The kindness that was once viewed as a gift can now feel like an obligation, and the people who once benefited may be reluctant to step up when the tables are turned. This creates a cycle of entitlement where the recipient expects help, but the giver is left disappointed and resentful when they find themselves unsupported. A classic example of this dynamic can be seen in workplace settings. Consider a colleague who is always volunteering to take on extra tasks, offering help to others and supporting everyone's initiatives. While this may be appreciated at first, over time colleagues may begin to take their support for granted, assuming that this person will always be available to lend a hand. When the time comes for the giver to ask for help or support, they may find that no one is willing to reciprocate. This can lead to feelings of frustration and resentment as the giver is left feeling isolated and unappreciated, despite their efforts to assist others. Real life stories often highlight how overgiving can lead to disappointment when boundaries aren't set. One common example involves friends or family members who are always there for others, offering their time, energy, and resources without hesitation. They may help with everything from household chores to emotional support, always putting the needs of others above their own. However, when these individuals need help or ask for a favor, they often find themselves met with indifference or reluctance. Take, for example, a woman who has always been the go to person in her friend group, always ready to lend an ear or help with personal problems. Over the years, she has cultivated a reputation as the reliable and selfless friend. However, when she herself is going through a difficult time, she finds that no one is offering her the same level of support. The dynamic of her friendships has shifted. What was once a relationship built on mutual care and respect has become an imbalance, where her kindness is no longer valued but expected. In these situations, the giver often feels hurt and betrayed, leading to a gradual erosion of trust and connection. At the heart of this issue is human nature and the tendency to take advantage of someone's generosity when no boundaries are set. People are often unaware of how their actions impact others, and when someone is constantly available to help, it can be easy to fall into the trap of expecting that help to always be there. In this way, the more someone gives, the more others may expect, without any thought to reciprocating. For instance, consider a coworker who frequently asks another colleague to cover for them when they are overwhelmed with tasks. At first, the colleague is happy to help, but as time goes on, the coworker begins to take this assistance for granted. They stop offering help in return, and instead, the one who was initially generous begins to feel burdened and unappreciated. Over time, the relationship between the two shifts from one of mutual respect to one of dependency, where the giver is left feeling exploited and drained. The person who is constantly helping without setting boundaries often finds themselves trapped in a cycle of giving that doesn't lead to fulfillment or growth. They may even begin to doubt their own worth, as their efforts to help others are no longer seen as a choice but as a requirement. This is where the importance of setting boundaries becomes clear. It allows the giver to preserve their energy, maintain a sense of control, and ensure that their kindness is respected and appreciated rather than exploited. In conclusion, the dangers of unrestrained kindness are real and far reaching. When kindness is given without limits, it can lead to burnout, resentment, and a cycle of entitlement. People who overgive without setting boundaries often find themselves taken for granted, with their kindness becoming an expectation rather than a gift. The key to maintaining healthy relationships and ensuring that kindness remains a positive force is to recognize the importance of boundaries. By setting limits and prioritizing self care, we can give in ways that empower others while also protecting ourselves from exploitation. Kindness and people pleasing are often misunderstood as being the same, but in reality, they are two vastly different behaviors that lead to very different outcomes. While kindness is an expression of goodwill and compassion, people pleasing is rooted in fear and insecurity, driven by a desire for approval or a need to avoid conflict. This subtle but significant distinction can have a profound impact on the giver and their relationships. People pleasing behavior is characterized by a tendency to say yes to everything, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or detrimental to one's well being. It stems from a fear of disapproval or rejection, as the individual feels the need to constantly meet the expectations of others. People pleasers typically go along with requests or demands, often out of a sense of obligation or guilt, rather than a genuine desire to help. This behavior can lead to a cycle of unappreciated giving, where the person who always says yes is often overlooked or taken for granted, and their acts of kindness are no longer seen as special or generous, but as a predictable routine. Eventually, the people pleaser may begin to feel used or exploited as their kindness becomes an expectation rather than a gift. The danger of people pleasing lies in its long term effects on one's emotional, mental, and physical well being. Constantly saying yes to others can create resentment, deplete emotional energy, and erode self respect. The people pleaser may feel like they are constantly giving, yet never receiving the appreciation or reciprocation they deserve. Over time, this can lead to feelings of emptiness, frustration, and even bitterness. A person caught in the cycle of people pleasing may end up feeling trapped, unable to say no or assert their own needs, which can have negative consequences on their mental health and overall life satisfaction. Consider the story of Sarah, who was known among her friends and colleagues as the person who would always help out, no matter the situation. She was the one who volunteered to organize events, take on extra tasks at work, and lend a listening ear to anyone in need. While Sarah's kindness was genuine at first, over time she began to feel overwhelmed and unappreciated. Despite her constant efforts to please others, she found that people were no longer expressing gratitude or acknowledging her contributions. Instead, they simply expected her to be there whenever they needed her. Eventually, Sarah began to feel drained and resentful, yet she couldn't stop herself from saying yes to every request. Her emotional energy was depleted and her self respect began to wither as she realized that her kindness had become more about avoiding conflict and gaining approval than about offering genuine help. This story illustrates how people pleasing can gradually deplete a person's emotional resources, leading to burnout and resentment. The hidden cost of always saying yes is profound. Over time, the people pleaser becomes emotionally drained and disconnected from their own needs and desires. The cycle of unappreciated giving can affect their relationships as they start to feel taken for granted. Their self esteem begins to erode as they come to believe that their worth is only tied to what they can do for others rather than who they are as individuals. This internal conflict between wanting to please others and feeling unappreciated can lead to a deep sense of frustration and dissatisfaction with life. This story illustrates how people pleasing can gradually deplete a person's emotional resources, leading to burnout and resentment. The hidden cost of always saying yes is profound. Over time, the people pleaser becomes emotionally drained and disconnected from their own needs and desires. The cycle of unappreciated giving can affect their relationships as they start to feel taken for granted. Their self esteem begins to erode as they come to believe that their worth is only tied to what they can do for others rather than who they are as individuals. This internal conflict between wanting to please others and feeling unappreciated can lead to a deep sense of frustration and dissatisfaction with life. A key aspect of people pleasing behavior is the inability to set boundaries. When someone constantly says yes to every request, they sacrifice their own well being in the process. This not only affects their emotional and physical health, but can also damage their relationships. For example, imagine someone who constantly helps their colleagues at work, staying late to assist with projects, and always volunteering to take on additional tasks. While this may initially be appreciated, over time it becomes expected. The person may not receive recognition for their efforts and their hard work goes unnoticed. Furthermore, they may even find themselves passed over for promotions because their contributions are no longer viewed as exceptional but as the bare minimum. The more someone gives without setting limits, the less they are valued, and the more their kindness becomes an obligation rather than a choice. So, what can one do to avoid falling into the trap of people pleasing? The answer lies in cultivating self respect and understanding the Stoic philosophy that teaches the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing one's own worth. Stoicism emphasizes that true kindness comes from a place of strength, not from a need for external validation. The Stoics, such as Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, taught that we should act in accordance with virtue, not out of fear or obligation. They believed that respect begins with ourselves and that we should never compromise our values or well being for the sake of others' approval. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often wrote about the importance of inner strength and self respect. He reminded himself that he should act according to his own values and not be swayed by the opinions of others. In one passage, he writes, "The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like that. This highlights the importance of not allowing external expectations or people's behavior to dictate our actions. Similarly, Epictetus taught that we should focus on what we can control, which is our own behavior and responses. If we constantly say yes to others out of fear of disapproval, we lose control over our own actions and ultimately our sense of self. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about the importance of setting boundaries and valuing our own time. He emphasized that we should not be overly concerned with pleasing others, as this can lead to the depletion of our energy and resources. Instead, we should act from a place of virtue and integrity, prioritizing our own well being and inner peace. The Stoics teach us that kindness should come from a place of strength, not from a need to please others. When we act with integrity and set healthy boundaries, we can continue to offer genuine kindness without losing ourselves in the process. By cultivating self respect and prioritizing our own needs, we can engage in acts of kindness that are empowering for both us and those around us without falling into the trap of people pleasing. In conclusion, people pleasing behavior is often mistaken for kindness, but it is rooted in fear and insecurity, and it ultimately leads to burnout, resentment, and diminished self respect. By recognizing the difference between genuine kindness and people pleasing, and by setting boundaries and cultivating self respect, we can ensure that our kindness remains a source of strength rather than a weakness. The Stoic philosophy teaches us to act from a place of inner strength and integrity, focusing on our own well being and values rather than seeking the approval of others. By doing so, we can create more meaningful and balanced relationships where kindness is given freely without the burden of expectation or exploitation. Boundaries are essential to maintaining mental health, protecting one's energy, and cultivating healthy relationships. In the context of kindness, boundaries are crucial because they help ensure that acts of goodwill are not only genuine, but also sustainable. Without boundaries, kindness can easily be manipulated or taken for granted, leading to burnout, resentment, and the breakdown of self respect. Self respect is the foundation for meaningful kindness. When we set clear boundaries, we ensure that our kindness is sustainable, respectful, and appreciated. We also gain more confidence as we start choosing when and how to help others rather than being driven by external pressures or the fear of disappointing people. By setting boundaries, you create a healthier dynamic where both your needs and the needs of others are respected. Now, let's talk about some practical tips for rebuilding your kindness in a way that empowers you and those around you. First, it's crucial to recognize your limits. Take the time to check in with yourself before offering help. Ask yourself, do I have the energy for this? Is this something I can genuinely offer, or is it just something I feel I should do? Pay attention to your emotions after helping others. If you feel drained, resentful, or unappreciated, it's a sign that your boundaries may need adjustment. Make sure that the kindness you're offering aligns with your values, and remember that saying no is not unkind. It's an essential part of self respect. Here's another tip: practice saying no with confidence. You don't need to justify your decision every time, but rather say something simple and direct like, I'm unable to help with that right now, but I appreciate you thinking of me. It's important to set boundaries, not just with others, but also with yourself. Recognize that you deserve to protect your own time, energy, and well being. Finally, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Ask yourself, am I giving with purpose, or am I just giving because it's expected? Take a moment to think about the relationships and situations in your life where you may be overgiving or people pleasing. Are you feeling appreciated, or is your kindness being taken for granted? If today's lesson resonated with you, I encourage you to share this video with others who might need to hear it. Let's shift the narrative around kindness, making it a source of empowerment rather than depletion. Remember, your kindness should lift you up, not drain you. Let your generosity come from a place of strength, and make sure it serves both you and those you help. In conclusion, true kindness is not about sacrificing yourself for the sake of others. It's about finding the balance between generosity and self respect. When practiced with boundaries, kindness becomes a tool for building trust, fostering genuine connections, and empowering both you and those you help. Remember, you deserve to give from a place of strength, not from a place of obligation. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. This quote reminds us that kindness, when rooted in self respect, is a powerful force that leads to meaningful change. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe for more lessons on Stoic wisdom and personal growth. We'll continue exploring how to live a life rooted in integrity, purpose, and strength. If you found this video valuable, please like, comment, and share it with others who might benefit from it. Together, let's shift the conversation about kindness, one that doesn't drain us but uplifts us all. Keep practicing kindness with boundaries and let your actions reflect the respect you have for yourself and others.